2, 3, 4.
Sometimes we need to slow it down. Take a look around and breathe. 'Cause these times go by so very fast. Moments never last. Just breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. Quiet, be still, don't shout. Love is what it's all about. Breathe. Sometimes when you feel you've had enough, living is just too tough. Just breathe. 'Cause you'll regret when these days are past. Your friend just seen your last. Just breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. Quiet, be still, don't shout. Love is what it's all about. Just breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. Love is what it's all about. Be quiet, be still, don't shout. Just breathe. Just love. Just love. Just love.
Good evening and welcome to another exciting episode of the Just Love Show here in beautiful Northern California, where I'm sure, with the exception of in December where we did get a little rain, everyone's probably getting a little tired of me telling you how beautiful it is here today. But it is absolutely stunningly gorgeous. And like we do before every show, we're going to sit back, take a deep breath, think about all the things we have to be grateful for, all the abundance in our lives, all the love in our lives, and really focus on that because that's the energy I want everyone to have as they listen to this show, and I want it to hopefully carry over into the next day. As I've been doing before I get to my guest tonight, read a little something that I think is appropriate that goes along with the show. And this just sort of felt to me as I was going through, I wanted to read something that really felt like it captured the spirit of creativity, which my guest tonight truly, when it comes to music and other art forms, is somebody who I think will appreciate this. This body, this life, this love, I am not, nor will I ever be. For this or any body, this or any life, this or any love, this or any me, we is innately God infinity, the divine rainbow prism, the holy trinity of infinite information, the raw, formless data of which all creation takes shape, infinite energy, the supreme creative consciousness that shapes the formless data into creation, infinite force, the binding, attracting, undeniable intention of love to manifest creation so that God infinity may experience itself. God infinity, infinitely dreaming, dreamt the infinite abstract that was into the infinite creation that is, all stories, all lies, all truths, all illusions of the sublime divine mind's brilliantly beautiful designs. To love myself, ourselves, is to love God infinity, for God infinity is all that is, and we are but blessed figments of her imagination, given free will to forget and pretend, to play in her sandbox of infinite space-time, that me, we are other, that me, we, this body, this time, this love, are for moments real. This is no me, we, there is no me, we, there is only God infinity experiencing herself, disguised as mother, giving birth to unending, unimaginably fantastical opus that is infinite creation. And then I want to follow up with the quotes from Alan Watts. And when I wrote that, I didn't think about tying it to music specifically, but Alan Watts really believed that music was it was a universal language, that it was actually the source of all language. And you'll understand why I'm hitting on the music theme tonight in just a bit. when I introduce my guest. Quote from Alan Watts: "The religious idea of God cannot do full duty to the metaphysical infinity." Before I get to my guest, who I know everyone's going to be thrilled to hear the story of his life and all the things that he's done in the music industry, I had thought I had done a little bit in the music business. I loaded 65,000 pounds of frozen strawberries on a semi-truck to get into San Francisco with 25 cents in my pocket, mistakenly looking for the 60s 20 years too late, only to find little LA and its hair band scene here. I played in bands. I wrote for Bam Magazine. I had the good fortune of being able to interview who are some of the most well-known artists of our times, from Gwen Stefani and No Doubt to Joan Jett to Green Day. I got to work with Linda Perry for a bit from the Four Non Blondes, who now is songwriter supreme, and got to work with Alex Skolnick, the lead guitar player in Testament. But none of anything that I've done comes even close to the guest I have tonight, who, amongst other things, is the new CEO of WLOR.net. And how fortunate are we to have him on board? Before I tell you his name, I'm going to read to you who he's worked with. Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, Phil Collins, Frank Zappa, Paul Anka, Charlie Daniels, Aerosmith, Kiss, Mariah Carey, The Jacksons, Journey, El Chicano, Phil Collins, Pete Brown, songwriter for Cream, Steve Wonder, Chicago, The Who, John Entwistle in regards to the soundtrack of the movie Jerry Maguire, Kim Wilde, Kate Bush, ABBA, Wet, 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 Simply Red, Simple Minds, Don't You Forget About Me, Anne Murray, Steve Miller, Dave Matthews, Elton John, ELO, Roxanne, David Nazareth, Booker T and the MG, Santana, Vicky Carr, Jesse J, Ronnie Wood from the Rolling Stones, Friends of Distinction, and, if you can believe this, many, many more. And maybe we'll find out from Gerry I let his name slip. Well, my guest tonight is Gerry Gallagher. He's a legend in the music business, producer, marketing, distribution. When I say he worked with these people, he worked intimately with these people. And maybe we'll get him to share with us who the craziest partiers were that he worked with. But without further ado, I want to welcome Gerry Gallagher to the Just Love Show. Gerry, welcome.
Thank you, Kip. Thank you. That was a very, very kind introduction there. I really do appreciate that. But yeah, it just proves I've been around for a long time. That's all.
we do amass our experiences as we go along. But let's start from the beginning. How did you go from Glasgow, Scotland, to Calabasas, California? And please don't short us on the details.
Wow, it's a long journey. 60 some odd years. 50 some odd years. Yeah, I came over here with my parents in 1963, and we emigrated from Scotland to California in 1963, and we went to a place called Echo Park in Los Angeles area, the little community of Echo Park in Los Angeles, and I love that place to this day because I learned so much there, and I grew up around so many fine artists and musicians that were all making Echo Park and Silver Lake their home at the time, and still do to this day. But they were making Echo Park their home, and that was their transition from where they were coming into Los Angeles and where they were going, which was the upper echelon of the music industry. But I hung out with guys like Linda Ronstadt, guys or girls like Linda Ronstadt, Woody Guthrie, and Ryan Ross, and Jackson Browne, and Glenn Fry, and Frank Zappa, and J.D. Souther, Tom Waits. They all lived in the same community I did, same area of Los Angeles that I did, and we grew up together. I knew the Eagles before they were the Eagles. They were the backup band for Linda Ronstadt, the Stone Ponies at the time, and we used to hang out in the areas of Echo Park together. So, it's been a journey from Scotland to Los Angeles, and then through the years, getting associated with the music industry through Ahmet Ertegun, and then, I live today in Calabasas, which again is ironic because some of the guys I grew up in Echo Park back in the day are now neighbors up here in Calabasas, which is, the new mecca for the for the music industry out here in California. So it's been a 360-degree journey that has brought me back to the same neighbors I had in Echo Park. But loving it. I love music. That's why I'm on the show, because it's all about love, and I contend that music is the greatest love you have.
Absolutely. To back up, well, first of all, I'd like to say, little prayers and best wishes. However you send good energy to somebody, I'd like to send some of that energy and love out to Linda Ronstadt right now. She could definitely use our prayers, and really hope that we someday get to hear her amazing voice again.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, you moved over here from Glasgow to LA. At what point in your life did you know you wanted to be involved with music? Were you a musician yourself? When did that desire, when did you know that's what you wanted to be in your life?
I knew music was going to be part of my life from a young age. I was always intrigued with music and loved music. And before I get into that, let me just also put out some positive energy to a good friend who's in hospital right now, Joni Mitchell. Joni.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yesterday, and love that woman, and she's what an inspiration she had on a lot of people. And Laurel Canyon days, I hung out with Joni and all that group up in Laurel Canyon, and my best wishes go out to her and Linda, of course. But two great women and that are good friends of mine, and I wish them all the best. But yeah,
maybe, I'm a huge Joni Mitchell fan. I'm so happy you brought that up. Quick little side note on Joni. I've never known her personally, but I used to. I still know him. I knew a guitar player, and I like to think him as sort of the Zelig of the music industry. A guy named Wayne the Train Perkins. He was a session player in down in Muscle Shoals, and he actually lived with Joni for a while, and he had such wonderful things to say about her.
Yeah, she's a wonderful person, and she's last I heard today, she's recuperating okay. She's up and talking. So my love goes out to her. I posted on Facebook, on my page on Facebook yesterday when I heard the news, and I've been monitoring it. So good luck to her. I wish her all the best. She's still got a lot to give to the music industry, and we love her. But in regards to your question, how I got involved in music and where, at what time in my life I was involved in music. Growing up, I was always around music. I had music, playing all the time. Anytime I was studying, anytime I was, I was listening to music instead of watching TV. That was the kind of guy I was. And I played bass. I learned early on how to play the bass because I couldn't play the guitar better than the guys around me. So I decided that a frustrated guitar player becomes a bass player. So that's what happened. I became a bass player, and then I found out that there was better bass players in the world, and I thought, well, I'll go into soccer, believe it or not. And I became a professional soccer player. I played soccer for several years, and it was actually through soccer that I met the guy that got me intricately involved in music, and that was Ahmet Ertegun. I was playing professional soccer, and Ahmet owned a professional soccer team at the time. He owned the New York Cosmos, and I was playing out here with San Jose Earthquakes and the LA Aztecs. And Ahmet was always trying to get me to come back to New York to play. And I kept telling him, hey, man, I'm 17, 18 years old. I'm out here in California. It's 80 degrees. There's sun. There's sand. There's beaches. There's girls running around in bikinis. I said, if you get that out in New York, I'll be out there in a heartbeat. And needless to say, that never happened. So I stayed here and enjoyed the sunshine. But Ahmet was he was a very good friend, and he got me into music at the upper echelon. So music's always been in my blood, and I'm so glad that I got the chance to meet up with Ahmet, and he turned the world of music over to me and open to me, and I've loved it ever since. I've just been, I have two loves in my life: my family and music, and they're pretty close to each other.
Yeah, I'm going to have you go into a little bit about who Ahmet was, because what I found, especially with a lot of the younger generations, is there's not this connection to the source of a lot of music, and I think I try to do my best to always educate. I'll give you an example. I was at social media event a couple years ago, and I was talking to a young lady there about Pink, and just saying, that I think she's one of the best female vocalists out there right now. And I said, you should hear her do Janis sometime. And this woman looked at me like I was from another planet, had no idea who Janis Joplin was. And I went, okay, I'm going to have to not just take for granted that people know these things, although it sort of dumbfounds me a little bit, because growing up, I wasn't around when Cab Calloway was around. I wasn't around when Beethoven was around. But even less known people than that, I knew who my grandparents loved. I knew who my great-grandparents loved. And I listened to that music. And I find it a little bit disturbing sometimes that people don't make that connection. But I'd love for you to share who Ahmet was and just how he shaped the face of music, in large part, not to really what it is today, but he definitely was the driving force behind a lot of the music that we all grew up with.
Oh yeah, Ahmet Ertegun is the pivotal point in my life, changed my life and sent me in the direction of my life that I'm still enjoying to this very day. So I have, anytime I can talk about Ahmet Ertegun, I'm talking about him, and I'm giving him all the praise in the world. He is, my mentor, and I was glad to be able to call him not just a colleague, but a friend as well. Ahmet Ertegun was the founder of Atlantic Records, and Atlantic Records was a crossover label when most people weren't crossing over. I mean, it started off really as a jazz label that turned into rhythm and blues and then rock and roll. And Ahmet Ertegun was the spearhead of that. He also ended up being bought out by Warner Brothers and became the CEO of Warner Brothers and Atlantic Records. So he was an amazing individual who had foresight way beyond anybody's dreams. I mean, he was thinking of bringing the British invasion over here long before anybody else did. And he brought over the likes of Led Zeppelin. He brought over the likes of the Rolling Stones. He brought over, famous names now that in the past were just up and coming bands out of the UK. And he also had a crossover with the rhythm and blues and bringing black music into the white society that was dominant back in the late 50s and into the 60s. So he was one of those crossover guys that saw music for what it was. It didn't have a race, it didn't have a creed, it didn't have a color. It was music. It was genuine music, and he wanted to bring that together. And he brought in, Bruno Mars and Ryan Starr and Coldplay and Cher and Rolling Stones and people, across the board that were amazing people that made their name in music with the help of Ahmet Ertegun. And you go back to the likes of Aretha Franklin. He made Aretha. Aretha was a dying talent when she was at Columbia, and he brought her over to Atlantic and made her a superstar. And Ray Charles and Wilson Pickett and stuff like that. Otis Redding was another great Atlantic record aficionado there. So Ahmet was special. He was a really special individual who started the company back in Atlantic back in 1947, I think it was, and it grew and grew and grew and grew. And when I got involved with Ahmet, it was one of the top labels in the world, for that matter. And it was a huge pleasure to be in his company. He was musically inclined. His father was a Turkish diplomat, believe it or not. And Ahmet used to go down to Harlem in the middle of the night, to go to Harlem in the middle of the night in New York and go down and listen to jazz in Harlem and invite the jazz players up to the Turkish embassy to play in the foyer, because you can get a great sound out of the foyer at that particular building there. And that was the kind of guy he was. He was around music. And if you have any interest in the history of music, look up Ahmet Ertegun. Ahmet was what they called the Sultan of music. He was the Sultan of music. And that man to this day is on my shoulder. When I have a question that I need to figure out in music, or if I'm doing something in the way of in music where I need to make a decision, it's a hard decision, I always think of what Ahmet would do. And that was exactly how I form my opinions and things, because Ahmet had this special way of looking forward and making things happen and developing talent that other people didn't see, and foresight. That was it's amazing foresight. So Ahmet Ertegun to me, and another gentleman by the name of Tom Dowd. If you want to learn about engineering, Tom Dowd is the guy you want to look up and talk about, because he invented all the things that are taken for granted today. He invented all the sliders on music boards. That was Tom Dowd invented that. Again, part of the Atlantic group and the Ahmet family. So Tom Dowd and Ahmet, a lot of credit to. They are pivotal in my life, and really put together in me something that I never saw, and made me look at music as my career and my life and my ambition. And 40 years later, I'm still doing what I love. So look up those guys and review them. The industry today, you have to respect what went before, because what people are enjoying now was built on the foundation so that Dan and Tom and other people built for them. And don't lose sight of that. There's amazing people out there that were doing things when nobody else was doing them, building things when people weren't even thinking about it. And Ahmet Ertegun and Tom Dowd are two people that I experienced in my life that I have high praise for, and I love both of them. I love them like my own family, and I thank them immensely. So Ahmet Ertegun, Tom Dowd, check it out. Do a Google on them. You'll see how influential these guys were to music, and are still. Some of the things that they did in the 40s, 50s, 60s, into the 70s, and God love him when Tom died in the 80s. That was it. Now, Ahmet died the way he would have wanted to die. He passed on several years ago, but Ahmet died at a Rolling Stone concert. Well, he fell and hit his head at a Rolling Stones concert and died a few days later. But that would have, if he had a chance to script his own death, that would have been the way he would have scripted it. But he died at a Rolling Stones concert, so he went out in style. And I love him. I love both those guys, and they gave me what I have today, and I thank them for that.
There are certainly, I think you're probably right. What a obviously not falling and hitting your head, but dying, where you love, in the company of all of the beings you love. That I can think of no better way to leave this physical plane behind.
Well, definitely. And like I said, if Ahmet could have scripted it, that he certainly would have done that. Go out at a Rolling Stone concert.
So you were playing soccer. Ahmet was trying to coerce you to go to New York to play soccer. What was that transition? And did you know, like for me, I look back in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God. In fact, I had one of those oh my God moments last week where Yogesh Gandhi, Gandhi's great nephew, is a good friend of mine. And I met him through very normal circumstances. I put together a public market in Vallejo, and he was one of my vendors. He was doing vegan Indian food. Even though he was a doctor as a business, he helped start for his son. And we became friends through that market. And it really didn't sink in fully to me that even though Gandhi's been a huge influence in my life, along with Martin Luther King and Buddha and Jesus and all these other tremendous love, empathy seekers. But it wasn't until last Thursday that it really sunk in who my friend was. And it was as I was holding handwritten notes from Mahatma to his wife. And as I was driving home, I went, oh my God, my life is so miraculous that I'm in the company of people like Yogi, and so many other people have crossed my path. Did you know who Ahmet was at that time, or was it in retrospect as you got to know him, and especially now that he's gone, that it really sunk in who he was to you? And how did you make that transition from soccer player to music industry executive, and what were some of the first things you did in the music business?
When I look back now, I think you put your life in retrospect, and look back, and it amazes you, and in my case, it really amazes me when I look back, because I never planned any of this. I never thought that I would be like this. When I got together with some friends from grammar school a few years ago, and they were like, oh my God, you played with this guy, you did this, you did that. And I took that all for granted. I really did. I took it all for granted. and it was just part of what my life was, and I was going through it. I mean, I met the guys from the Eagles before they were the Eagles, and then I watched them become superstars. But they were my friends, and I was, good friends with Pete Brown, who wrote all the Cream songs. And when you're doing that, and when you're going through that time, and when you're seeing this happen, they're not history yet. But in retrospect, when you look back, they were a part of history. And the same as Ahmet. When I talk to people and the new Ahmet or talk to people at New Atlantic Records, of that, oh my God, you knew Ahmet Ertegun. Yes, I did. And I'm sorry to say this, but I took it for granted for a long period of time who Ahmet was and what significance he was. And the same way as when I worked with Frank Sinatra in 1991, I took it for granted. And years later, you talk to people, and they're telling you what their perspective of Ahmet Ertegun or Frank Sinatra or the likes of Frank Zappa and Paul Anka and people like that. And it's like, you worked with these guys? And I thought, in retrospect, when you look back and go, oh my God, yeah, I did. And I remember reading an article that was done about me about 4, 5, 6 years ago, and I read the article, and I usually don't read the press. I don't read it. But this article, I just sat down one day and I picked it up and I was reading it. And all of a sudden, I became a third party, a third member of my own life. I started to look at it going, oh my God, look at these names. You were part of this. And then when you think about it, when you were coming through it, you were not thinking about what you were doing. You were not thinking about making history. You were not thinking about this as a significant milestone in music. Those came later because then when they look back, they were significant. And when they look back, they changed the course of music. And, when I was with Alexa Zeppelin on the road with Zeppelin and Peter Grant and stuff like that, well, now you look back and what Peter Grant did with Led Zeppelin and venues and changing that whole atmosphere, that was historic. That was immense. And when you were doing it, when we were going through it, it was just a hard chore that we were working on at that time to get things done and move on and get on the next plane to the next venue and do that, do what we had to do. It's the same as with Ahmet. When I used to go to New York and Ahmet would call me and say, hey, pick me up, we're going to go to dinner. And we'd go to dinner and we'd go from nightclub to nightclub to nightclub to, Studio 54 and all that stuff and meet the upper echelon of the world now. But at that time, they were up-and-coming guys. They were just people that were part of our life. And then 20 years later, Phil Collins is a huge superstar, and Mick Hucknall's a huge superstar, and Stevie Wonder is not little Stevie Wonder anymore. He's a huge superstar. Those were the points that when you look back, and your question is a great question because when you look back in retrospect, you have to look back as a third party and say, wow, I think you mentioned that yourself. You started to appreciate who your friends were. You started to appreciate who your colleagues are. I started to appreciate who I'd worked with and said, oh my, what an amazing array of people. And I don't say that because I want to be included in that. I say that from the standpoint of humility, saying, wow, I am so lucky. I am so honored. I'm so blessed to have been put in that position to be part of that. Right place, right time. The industry was right for it. It was a burgeoning industry, just ready to blow up in a big, big way. And all these guys were coming through. And, you mentioned all those, the people I worked with, AC/DC, Phil Collins, Charlie Daniels, Stevie Wonder, Kate Bush, what. All these guys they had to start somewhere. And that's where I was around when they were starting and coming up in their early ages of their development and was able to be part of that. And now when you look back, Led Zeppelin's one of the biggest bands that's ever been. Well, back when I was with them, they were a big band and they were well known, but they were in competition with 100 other bands that were out there. And history dictates what history is, and it's looking back. And so I can only say that I'm humbled. I'm so grateful to be able to say that I did have association with all these different people. And I say that with the humblest way possible because I never dreamed this. I never dreamed that I'd be sitting 40 years later talking about being friends with these people and associate with these people and producing these people and working on distribution and marketing and promotion and all that with all these different bands and what have you. I'm the most staggered guy in the world when I look back at my life and say, wow, it came out pretty good. and I had no plans for it. It was just, it just developed. So, and the other part of your question, how I got involved with Ahmet, Ahmet brought me under his wing, and we started to do things. And Ahmet had a philosophy of hands-on philosophy, so he gave me some projects to do, and they worked out. He liked what I was doing, and then he just decided to put me on the road with the bands he was investing a lot of money in, and being the eyes and ears on the ground for him. And that's how I got involved with Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, ABBA, and the likes. And I was eyes and ears on the ground for Ahmet, and traveled the world and went to 4 corners of the world and saw some amazing things. And a lot of people tell me I should write a book, but a lot of people have to die before I can do that. But the reality of it is that I'm the most blessed and staggered guy in the world when I look back at my life and how I fit into that little bit of history called music.
And what was that transition from soccer to the music business? When did that take place, and how exactly did how did Ahmet know that was something you wanted to do, as opposed when he couldn't get you to come play soccer in New York? How did that happen?
Well, it's funny because I later got injured and I couldn't play anymore, and I started up a courier company. And at that time, DHL and TNT and FedEx were all new and upcoming courier companies. So I started a courier company, and I was shipping for the movie industry and some of the music industry. And Atlantic Records and Warner Bros. Was one of my clients. So I was shipping their stuff around the world, and this is way before internet, where you had downloads. This is where if a disc jockey if you wanted a disc jockey to play your music on the radio, you have to physically get them an album or a 45, or later on a cassette tape, or even later on to that, some discs. But it was all physical, and so was the computer industry. And I had the computer industry, I had the movie industry, and I had the music industry as clients because of the connections I had there. And because of that, I was moving all around the world. I was constantly on the go. And I would always go into New York, and I'd make a point to go up to Ahmet and sit down with him and, have lunch with him, and just I just loved being in his presence. So, I would go up there, and how I got into the music industry instead of being in the courier industry was that I was sitting in his office one day, and he said to me, he had some reports that had just come across his desk, and he was looking at them, and he's saying, Ahmet had a gruff voice, I can't believe this. And I said, what's wrong? He goes, look at this. This is my distribution figures for South America. And I said, okay. He goes, I'm getting 2% and 3% of my product through. I go, you're kidding me? And he says, no, you're in the courier business. What can you do to figure this out? I go, I don't know anything about the music business. I don't know anything about music distribution. And he says, well, I'll tell you what, can you do better than 2%? I said, well, Ahmet, I think a monkey could do better than 2%. But you're sending out 100%, and you're only getting 2%. And Ahmet said to me, son, you're now my monkey. And he threw the papers over at me, and he said, look into it, figure it out, and let's figure out what's going on here. I trust you. So I started to look into why his music distribution, physical music distribution in South America, was not working out. And what it was customs. The stuff would be sent down there. There was customs guys that were taking the stuff and putting it on the black market. So, and that happened with a lot of the labels. So a lot of what was destined for the stores in South America were not getting through. So I started to look into it, and then through my courier company, we did all the distribution. We started putting them into our own warehouses. We had customs in our warehouse instead of outside, where they could be pilfered. And all of a sudden, the numbers just changed drastically. And at that point, that's where I said, oh, my God, I can't believe what you did here. Well, it was basic common sense. I just figured out what the problem was and sorted it out. But at that point, then he said, I was like special projects for him. Go do this, go do that, go do this, go do that. Go over and see this band. I'm putting a lot of money into it. And I ended up going over there and meeting Jimmy Page and John Bonham, and the rest is history. So, that was basically it. The industry was a fledgling industry at that point. I mean, they were reaching around the world and really didn't know what they were doing. And a lot of this was going on. I mean, there was a lot of black market going on. And once you sorted it out, and you moved on. And again, I didn't do anything special. I just figured out what the problem was, sorted it around, and turned the figures upside down so that were realistic again. Instead of 2% getting through, we're back at 90% getting through. So it was a, you know, and then at that point, then Capitol, EMI, Columbia, they all got in touch with me, and things started to develop music-wise for me. And then Ahmet, put me on the road with Led Zeppelin from 1976 to 1980, when one of my best friends in the business, John Bonham, Bonzo, died in 1980. And so I was on the road with them from 76 to 80, and then AC/DC and the rest. But it was just a transition time in my life, and I was young, I was energetic, I was wanting to find out what I wanted to do with life, and I was given the opportunity to look into things that were intriguing to me, and saying, wow, how do I turn this around, man? And it was a lot of hard work and a lot of head banging just to figure it all out. But once it was figured out, it was pretty clear as what was going on, and pretty clear what we had to do, and we did it. And again, I had Ahmet behind me who was like, yeah, okay, go do it, let's get it done, let's show the world. And that's what sticks with me all the time. I'm probably one of the most positive people in the world, because I met Ahmet Ertegun, and he told me there's nothing you can't do. There's nothing you can't do. You can always find a way to complain afterwards, and there's always a way that you can make it not work. But go out there and try at least. Give it your all and make it happen. And things will come out of that. So that was, to me, that's how I got involved with Atlantic. That's how I got out on the road, and I made some tremendous friends in my life.
You never fail when you choose to experience. When you choose, that's one thing I can look back on my life, and despite any mistakes, any challenges, anything, there's nothing I would change, because I can honestly look back and say I walked through any door I wanted to walk through. Right or wrong, I walked through the door. And
exactly.
And that is it's so important for people to understand, overcome that fear of the unknown. Walk through the door. You have nothing to lose, and at the worst case, you walk out with a new experience, a new amount of knowledge that you take forward in your life, and that you're able to share with others.
Exactly. Those are great words. And that door will always stay closed if you don't try to open it. And what's the good of it then? You're just looking at a closed door, and you have to venture. You definitely have to venture in life. And if you're going to accomplish things that are important to you, you have to put yourself in a position to meet that importance. And it doesn't come to you. You have to go find it. And that's how I've lived my whole life. I've never been afraid to venture. I've never been afraid to explore. I've never been afraid to go out and say, okay, wow, they say that can't be done. Well, obviously, it can be. You just got to figure out a way of doing it. And that's where it is. I mean, music is that way. I mean, people that come, the hardest thing in the world is to write a song and develop a song and bring a song out, and and believe in it for months or even years while you're developing it. And everybody's telling you, you can't be a songwriter, you can't do this, you can't do it. And then when you do, it's like, it worked. I stuck in there. I made it happen. Well, that's because you loved what you're doing, and you believed in yourself. And you can't believe in anything else if you don't believe in yourself. I mean, you have to love yourself before you can love other people too. And that's the most important thing. Be very confident in what you are, and work on that. And I work on that every day. I mean, I learn something every single day, because if you don't, you stop growing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you find that the more you love yourself, the more you love other people, and it's the more, and that you have more, the more you love yourself, you have more love to give to other people. And if you don't love yourself, then you have no love to give to other people, and you don't have a way to continue to make that love grow. I think it was, I think it's a Buddha who said that love is never diminished. It's like a candle. You can just keep lighting it, to paraphrase the quote. And the more you are able to love yourself, the brighter your candle burns, and the more others' candles you're able to light. Ahmet
used to have a saying that success is a comfort zone you once left.
Mm-hmm.
You have to move out of your comfort zone and move into other areas. And success is a comfort zone you once left. So I always look at that as moving forward, striving.
We talk about comfort zones a lot here because it can be really dangerous because you can be in the worst situation imaginable, and that comfort zone will be better than that unknown you're afraid to step into. And fear of the unknown stops so many people from achieving the goals in their life and also traps them in situations that they desperately need to leave.
Very true, very true. I call it the Kodak syndrome because Kodak controlled the film marketplace, one of the richest companies in the world, one of the most biggest companies in the world, and got into a comfort zone where they were very comfortable where they were and didn't realize it was a future, and that future was digital, and digital destroyed Kodak, and Kodak destroyed himself because they didn't keep up with what the future was going to hold, and lived on their laurels up until there was none, and reality hit them and it's all over,
Now, I want to backtrack a little bit because you brought up something I was going to ask you a question about. Anyway, as you know, we're doing radio theater here. In fact, we had a meeting regarding an upcoming program we're doing in May, which is called The Road to Fenderville. It's all about a mythical town in Louisiana where all the supposedly deceased rock stars and movie stars lived. And you mentioned John Bonham. He's actually one of the characters in the show. So many people, as I'm looking at the list of people you've worked with, so many of these groups had members die. Some of these people are gone. You kind of answered the question because John was close to you. But which death shocked you the most? You think about Bon Scott. You think about Keith Moon, who there was some writing on the wall with that. But was every death a shock to you, or were most of them you saw it coming?
You never see it coming. You envisage that they're doing the wrong thing and it's going to catch up with them, but you never see the death coming. 1980 was the changing year in my life. I realized in 1980 that rock and roll was not all fun and games. I realized that this whole surfboard of experience I was on, going through life and catching every wave, and it was a great wave, wasn't reality. In 1980, you mentioned two names, Bon Scott and John Bonham. Those both were friends of mine. Those both were very close friends of mine. They both died in 1980. They both died within months of each other. Reality hit me in the face with like a baseball bat. I realized that this rock and roll game that we were on, this rock and roll beautiful music thing that we all loved, it had a dark side. It had an ugly side. It had a mortal side. And it hit me so hard.
A mortal side. I love that. A mortal side.
Yeah. Yep. And it got so much that I almost gave it up. I just thought, this is too much to handle. And John Bonham was my friend, and he's gone. And Bon Scott was my friend, and they died the same way, and it was abuse of alcohol and taking it to the limits. And we all thought, hey, that's fun and games, but you can control it, right? But then you realize you couldn't control it. You couldn't. Their lifestyle caught up with them, and I'm not going to question anybody's lifestyle. That's their own thing. But it hurt. It really, really got to the core of my heart and my soul when these guys died, and it was a reality check. And they were young. They were in the prime of their life. We were with Zeppelin getting ready to do another United States tour. We were talking about it. We were at Jimmy Page's house, and John was having a bad day. He was drinking, and I left him that day, and the last thing he said to me was, "Hey man, looking forward to the tour. I love you, man. See you later." And I walked out, went to my hotel, and woke up the next morning to the news telling me John Bonham had died, and I could not believe it. I couldn't believe it for 6 months. I couldn't believe it for a long period of time that this was reality that just hit me in the face. And so it wasn't that any single death was more. It was that a change in my life was brought on by death, and death of very close guys, and they were all part of the music scene. And I can go back to, I was just reflecting with my wife just yesterday that last year I lost 12 friends in music. So, but I can accept that now. These were older guys that are coming to the end of their lives. But it was very hard to accept that in 1980, John Bonham was gone. It was very hard to understand that Bon Scott was gone. All right, they were crazy, happy-go-lucky guys that lived on the edge, but they were gone. They were now gone. It was all over. They were never coming back, and that was a reality check. So, yeah, it was tough. It was very, very, very tough. But in hindsight, again, I look back now, 30-odd years later, and it was, again, a strengthening position in my life where I now saw, okay, this is reality. You know, these things do happen. And you don't experience this and you don't understand they happen until they happen. And when they do happen, it's a magnitude. It's huge. It's huge. When a part of your life is now gone forever, it's huge. You've got to fill that gap, and it's almost impossible to do. But it makes you a stronger person, makes you, you know, work harder to move on. And, you know, to this day, I mean, John Bonham's still in my heart and my soul. You know, Bonham Scott's still there. All these guys that were part of my life, and I can go on and tell you 10 or 15 other guys, you know, that died at a young age. But those two really affected me, and 1980 was my turning point.
Wow. Yeah, Bon Scott hit me really hard, just as, I mean, they all every musician's death hit me hard, but Bon, I was just such a fan of AC/DC's music and his style, and I wasn't even thinking about, I wouldn't think about anyone dying, but I don't know why, just Bon Scott's death really sticks in my head. It just was one of those things that I think they were getting ready to come tour in Oregon, and I think I was getting ready to come see them, and I was looking forward to it, and then it just didn't happen. And you know, never would. Yeah. Before we move on to talk about where the music industry has been, where it's gone, where you see it's going, and also what your plans are with WLOR.net in the future. I want to ask you one question. Of all the artists that you've worked with, who were some of the easiest artists to work with, and who were more, to put it diplomatically, who are some of the more exacting artists to work with?
That's a good way of putting exacting. Exacting. The easier artists to work with were the ones that were the consummate professionals who came prepared, knew what they were going to do, and came in to do it. I was told in the industry, a couple of guys that I worked very closely with were almost impossible to work with, but I found them to be the easiest, and that was Phil Collins and Frank Sinatra. Phil Collins was very determined to do things the way he wanted to do them, and in retrospect and looking back, they were all the right ways. So the people that say it was hard to work for, they just didn't realize that he was a genius and he knew what to do. And I found when somebody trusts you and you trust somebody back, then it's much easier to work with. So Phil Collins and Frank Zappa is another one. Really, really, you know, smart individuals, way ahead of their time. And I found them really easy to work with. Some guys I find were just great guys was Mick Hucknall and Jim Kerr. I mean, they're great guys to work with. And Ronnie Wood, I love Ronnie. He's just such a great guy and fun to work with. I love Vicky Clark. Vicky was fantastic to work with. You know, and again, they were all people that when they came to do their job, they were ready. They came to do the job. You didn't have to play games with them, and they were there to give you what they had, the talent that they had, and they respected that talent so much that they weren't going to play around with it. They were going to give you what you wanted and give you even more than what you wanted. So, from my point of view, that was accomplishing my objectives, so that it was easy to work with them. Tune into them, make them understand that you're there for them. You're there. You can be trusted. I'm there to help them get the best out of what they have, not to do it my way. Sure, we have parameters, but I'm working with artists who really know their themselves a lot better than I do, and I'm now going to try to enhance that by capturing those magic moments that we can get out of them. So those were the type of people that were really easy to work with. There was some bands and some people that were very tough to work with, and the music industry is like a family. There's real good moments, and then there's the wayward children in families too. And we had a few of those, and you know, it was tough in some cases. You know, one of the experiences I had when I was with Led Zeppelin and AC/DC, and then Ahmet sent me over to see this band from Sweden that was this nice family band from Sweden, and I thought, oh, that's cool, man. I've been on the road with Zeppelin and AC/DC, and wow, I was just partying down, and life was 150 miles an hour, and they sent me to Sweden and to hook up with this band, and it was a band called ABBA, and I realized right away.
I still don't believe this, by the way. This is the funniest thing you've told me. being one of the few people that will publicly admit I'm a huge ABBA fan. When you told me this, I cannot keep from smiling every time I think about it.
Yep. Well, ABBA was one of the biggest, hardest rock and roll bands around, party wise. They were party animals, and it was all out. I mean, they were all out, and again, ABBA's the biggest, the richest band in the world too. I mean, ABBA's made more money in music than anybody. But back in those days, man, they were out there playing it, and they were out there. And I thought, here, I'm on vacation. I'm going to be with ABBA. And I remember calling Ahmet and saying, hey, man, get me back to Zeppelin or get me back to anybody, man. And he couldn't believe it. So, ABBA was an experience, and I love them. And they did their thing, and I'm very proud of what they did. I mean, they went on, and Mamma Mia, I think it's got like 10 touring troops around the world now, and they're everywhere. I mean, they're everything. Every time you turn around, you'll find ABBA somewhere, and all those closet ABBA fans, there must be millions of them, because they're all out, watching ABBA every chance they get, buying anything that's ABBA related. So there's millions out there. But that was an experience for me, and the band I work with now is a band I love is El Chicano, and El Chicano had 6 gold and platinum albums from 1970 to 1976, and they're all like my family. Freddie Sanchez and Gail Sanchez's birthday today. I love and best wishes to Gail. I know she'll be listening in. It's her birthday today. But those are the good and the bad. I love the guys I'm working with. I love the guys I mentioned, but there are always a little bit of I want to say surprises along the way.
Yeah, so we're actually, the hour has flown by. Let's, as much as we can in the last few minutes, and before we introduce your song, let's talk a little bit about, we know a little bit about where the music industry started, or, a lot of the influences on modern music as we know it from you sharing with us your experience with Ahmet. And then we know what happened in the 90s with everything going to digital downloads. I lived through that, and I just watched the labels disappear. I watched people going from getting, $1 million signing bonuses and recording at places like the Record Plant in Sausalito and Fantasy Studios and you name it, and being given these huge budgets and producers, to where it's like, here's $50,000 and a set of Pro Tools, go home and record your album, and seeing how the quality of the music declined because there wasn't that incubation period for bands to develop, and the labels seemed to have no impetus in developing artists. They just went by whatever the internet was telling them most popular, clear up to now where it's all driven by social media. Now, you have a different vision for the music industry tomorrow, and I think in some ways WLOR.net is going to play a part in that, and if you could share that vision with us, that'd be great.
Yeah, I look at the industry right now as a brand new industry again. The record industry as we knew it is dead. It's gone. It'll never come back. They can't come back. It's the technology of today allows for so many downloads and so much free distribution of music that you have to take that as a fact and move on and rechange the industry and make it different. I look at internet radio that we're on right now, and WLOR.net is part of, and I'm really excited about this because I see it as a shopping mall. And the more good quality stores you put in the shopping mall, the more people are going to come and watch and get involved in shopping your mall. And that's what we're trying to do with WLOR right now. We're trying to put real quality programs together, and a variety of programs, and some real top-notch programs. And we've got some of those coming on now and into the future. And I also look at the internet as like the old days of pirate radio. Remember the old pirate radios where you used to have a ship offshore in the UK and they'd be transmitting wavelengths to the mainland so that people can tune in the middle of the night to hear about all the things that are happening in music instead of what then the BBC or the specific radio stations of Europe that were government owned were allowing on the airs, and that's what you have right now when you have the big conglomerates. You have conglomerates out there, iHeartRadio and the likes, that they loop 100 songs, and that's what you're going to get. You get 100 songs on their radio stations for a month and maybe 2 months, and you tune in and you're hearing the same things over and over and over again, and it's stuff that they have a vested interest in, or somebody's advertising on their network or whatever. So you're limited to what they consider to be good music. The internet and WLOR is going to be an outlet for different kinds of music, different kinds of interview shows, different kinds of entertainment shows, and it's going to be our shopping mall of all these great stores where people can come to and tune in, morning, noon, or night, around the world, wherever you are. You can listen to interesting bits and pieces. I've got a girl coming on with a radio show. She's one of the top authors in adult and teenage fantasy books, and she's written 4 or 5 books now on the Cat's Eye Chronicles, and she's going to have a radio show and on WLOR coming up in May, and it's going to be dynamite because she released her last book, Download. The book industry is going like the music industry. It's a digital download now. So she put up a brand new digital book, and in a couple of days sold 50,000. So I mean that's the kind of patronage he has, and we're going to have her on the radio, and these people listening to her on the radio, and making an interesting format for people that want to come in and be part of WLOR. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm intricately involved. I've got my own show coming up. I'm going to have a live show out of California with some of the great rock and roll stars of our time: Verdine White, David Page, Andy Kahn. They're all going to be on my show on April 9th. Verdine White from Earth, Wind & Fire, David Page from Toto, Andy Kahn from keyboardist with the Turtles. I'm going to get them on and doing what you're doing with me right now, talking about their history in rock and roll and talking about their stories, and keep the rock and roll name, the rock and roll game, the rock and roll plethora of fun and games alive, and that's what I want to do.
Well, Gerry, I want to thank you so much for being on the show tonight. We could go on, and I would like to do this again because there's a lot more I want to cover with you on the music industry, where it's going. I want to talk to you about Tidal and some of the other things that are happening. We can do that either on another show, on your show, or come on to my show again. But I'd like you to introduce the song before we play out. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I truly appreciate and respect everything that you've done in the industry, and it's just been truly an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show tonight.
Okay, and then is it the Outbound song? Look it up?
That's it.
Okay. Yep, this is a song that I wrote for El Chicano on their new CD. It's coming out in a couple of months now. A big distribution deal we're working on right now with that. It's called Outbound. It's just about a guy fulfilling his dreams, much like I have in my career with music. This is about a guy coming from a small town trying to make it in the music business, and he's outbound. He's leaving his town, going out to the big world. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what WLOR.net's about. That's what I'm about. That's what music's about. Live your life and enjoy every minute of it. And hope you enjoy Outbound.
Seem to happen as I turn it around. Outbound dreams keep growing on the weekend. Trying to quit my day job and doing a lot of thinking. Feel the breeze blowing on my face, standing in the shade. 11 o'clock in the morning. Jump up on this train again. No got some friends along the way. In the meantime, I keep singing this song. It's all about love, trying to get along.